These are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. This is Dr. Richard Barwell, and welcome to Brain-Based Wellness today with Dr. Bob Hoffman. I am more than pleased and honored to introduce Bob to you today. I've had a great relationship with Bob over the last few years. We've been friends for many years, but the last few years have managed to really start talking to one another about the future of this profession. And I'm tickled pink to say that the best coaching around are the people that look to the future, and I think that the Master Circle, Dr. Bob Hoffman and Dr. Dennis Perman are the people that you need to be consulting with. I had a great practice history when I was a clinician, but I know one thing, that my practice never really exploded or grew to its potential until I got a coach. And it took a long time for me to understand that I didn't have all the answers. As far as I'm concerned, when you take a look at the Master Circle, their ability to coach on communication, on the new directions of chiropractic, on practice tips and practice management, years of experience, these guys have got it all. And so without any further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Bob Hoffman, my friend and colleague.
Thank you so much, Richard. That's very kind of you, and you know the feeling is mutual. I have the highest level of respect and admiration for you and what you continue to do with your career and influencing the lives, the thinking, the behavior of chiropractors around the world. My hat's off to you, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, so let's get into today's webinar on brain-based wellness, the new chiropractic story. And I think it's important to lay some foundation down right up front. You know, just about 6 years or so ago, I wrote a best-selling book called Discover Wellness: How Staying Healthy Can Make You Rich. I'm proud of the fact that I was the first chiropractor in the history of our profession to have a best-selling book. Becoming a best-selling author on Barnes & Noble and Amazon the first day it was released. The book was profound, and the reason I'm starting off with that is because in the multiple hundreds of pages in the book, I never once mentioned brain-based wellness because I had not yet evolved or grew to that level. We talked about wellness on all different levels, but I never did relative to brain-based. I also had 23 sensational years in practice where I consistently saw 150 to 175 patients a day, and I am embarrassed to say that I never mentioned the brain ever in practice. And I'm thrilled that life changes. We keep refining, improving ourselves, learning new things, and it's through the help of many people, including you, Richard, that allowed me to understand the significance of brain-based wellness, and that it is really time for us to tell a new story. And I will go over the languaging of that new story, the research behind it, why it's so significant, how to implement it in practice during this webinar. Obviously, I will touch on some of the real key points to get people to think different. My main objective today is to shift your thinking, to get you to understand at a deeper and more profound level how important, how significant, how valuable, how life-changing and life-improving chiropractic really is. But we have to understand that chiropractic is different than what we thought it was or what we talked about or how we languaged it over these last 100+ years. For us to get to the next level of understanding, the next level of acceptance, the next level of utilization, way past 10% of the population, is we've got to clean up the story. We've got to modernize the story. We've got to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, not just a piece of it. So let's start to dig in, and let's begin this journey on brain-based wellness together. The National Institute of Health, which is run by the United States government and is a very conservative group by nature, has stated that up to 90% of all illness is related to stress. Now, I don't believe that. I believe it's a very conservative number. I think it's closer to 95 or 98% of all sickness, disease, and illness is related to stress. And regardless if the number is 90 or 98%, either way, this is dramatically different and far worse than it was just 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. Our stress level continues to rise, continues to magnify, because we live in a fast-paced, high-tech, high-stress world. Stress is everywhere. We have physical stress, we have chemical stress, we have emotional stress. Physical stress may be worse than it was 20 years ago because we're more sedentary, we're not as active, we're not as athletic, we're not in as good shape, which is interesting because there's so many people that are exercising every single day, but there are problems like obesity that continue to grow at record levels. Chemically, clearly we're under more stress. There are more additives, colorings, dyes, preservatives in the foods we eat. The chemicals that we ingest through our water, through all of the resources that we have, much worse today than just 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 years ago. But the real culprit here is emotions. Our emotional stress level is at an all-time high. We have traffic stress, relationship stress, time stress, money stress, the work stress. It's endless, and it's clearly impacting people. As a result of all of this, I am now certain that we're entering into the early stages of the worst epidemic of all time, what I'd like to call the neurological epidemic. Now, there are indicators, clear-cut, consistent indicators telling us this, and I'm going to dig into them in the next few moments. Let's go to the next slide. This most dangerous epidemic of all, the neurologic epidemic, tells us that ever-growing lists of people are now suffering from Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, autism, insomnia, lupus, multiple sclerosis, acid reflux, irritable bowel syndrome, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, anxiety, migraines, depression, and the list goes on and on. This is all I can get onto one slide. But there are many, many neurologically based diseases that are just growing at record rates. And quite frankly, I actually have a high degree of respect for certain things within the medical world, but medicine has no answers for any of these. There is no pill that will fix a neurological-based problem. There's no surgical procedure that will fix a neurological-based problem. They're basically lost in this arena. They're great at certain things, but certainly not in these neurological problems, this new epidemic, which is why these conditions are growing at such amazing, rapid levels. And I bet there isn't anyone listening to this that doesn't unfortunately know people, multiple people, with these kinds of syndromes, situations, diseases, and illnesses. And if you were to ask your patients, they all know lots of people with this as well. We're really talking about an epidemic here. Let's go to the next slide, please. So here's how it all begins. All forms of stress. We talked about physical stress, chemical stress, emotional stress. All forms of stress are in reality brain stress. I'd like you all to write that down. It's a new word, a new phrase, brain stress. All stress is our nervous system's ability to comprehend its internal or external environment properly. When it can't do that, the brain goes out of balance. That's brain stress. Prolonged brain stress causes a sympathetic, parasympathetic imbalance, creating a neurological cascade of events, putting us into a sympathetic survival syndrome. I'd like you to write that one down as well. Another new term, sympathetic survival syndrome. Now this is really important. Before we go to the next part of this slide, let's really dig in at this. As I said, all forms of stress are brain stress, causing the brain to go out of balance. What happens here is our sympathetics are designed innately and naturally to fire when we're under stress. That's the fight-flight mechanism. It's supposed to do that. But what's also supposed to happen is when that stressful event stops, we're supposed to go back into a relaxation response. The problem is because most people are bombarded by some type of stress all day, most of the day, every day. Our sympathetics are firing hot, our parasympathetics are not, and we get into this place where the sympathetics are so dominant that we get into a survival syndrome. A survival syndrome means that the sympathetics, the fight-flight mechanism, is all about survival. That's what it's there for. It's an innate natural response. But we get stuck in it. We get trapped in it. It's not ever going back into a relaxation response. And this, over time, causes the whole range of neurological problems. Now, quite frankly, this is not only important for us chiropractors, but it's also important for us chiropractors to be able to document this, to be able to be aware of this, to be able to test it, to be able to show that it's improving. And this is one of the many, many reasons I am such a big fan of the NeuroInfiniti. Because in most chiropractic practices, they could understand this, they could agree with this information, but they have no way to measure it. They have no way to document it. They have no way to report it. It's more instinct or belief than documentation. And this is a problem in this new story. And again, one of the reasons neurologically based chiropractic is so important to me, because we must be able to talk about it, communicate it, report it, language it in a way that people get it, see it, understand it. This, in one fell swoop, would change people's value of chiropractic. You know, things like time, distance, and money, the three biggest reasons why patients don't come in, don't start care, or drop out of care, are really only a side effect. They're a side effect of people not valuing what we do as much as we value what we do. And I believe, in fact, I've documented this with many practices that I coach, that when we start talking about and documenting brain stress, and that people are now shifting into a sympathetic survival syndrome, and the types of problems that it will manifest in epidemically, patients get it. They no longer see chiropractors as a luxury. They start to see chiropractic as a necessity. And this is such an important and easy way to rapidly grow your reputation, your results, your retention, and your ability to attract new patients. Let's go back to the sympathetic survival syndrome. We need to recognize that it's been reported that more than 2 billion people worldwide are now suffering from brain-based health challenges. Recognize, chiropractors, that every one of those people need to be coming to you and in your office. These people desperately need chiropractic care. They need to have some methodology of releasing, lowering, minimizing that brain stress, getting them out of the sympathetic survival syndrome. There are other ways to do it besides chiropractic, but there's nothing that does it as effectively, as quickly as chiropractic, and we'll be discussing that again in a few moments. So this issue, this epidemic of neurological problems, the overbearing stress in people's lives, this represents a significant window of opportunity for us to really elevate chiropractic, create the value in chiropractic, reposition chiropractic, and for you to grow your practices like never before if you're prepared, if you understand. So let's dig in further to what brain stress is and why it's so dangerous. Let's recognize that anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the United States, affecting 40 million American adults. That's shocking. Since 1988, the rate of antidepressant use in the United States has increased by 400%. This isn't a genetic problem. This is a problem of us trying to rely on pharmacology to correct a lifestyle issue. This is a problem of people being under stress and having no idea how to go back into a relaxation response. Today, 1 in every 10 Americans aged 12 and over take antidepressant medication, the most frequently used drugs by people in the age group of 18 to 44. This is startling. And the reason I share these statistics with chiropractors is because as chiropractors, we think people are kind of like us. You know, we don't take antidepressants, we don't have anxiety disorders, but the rest of the world does. Now, I want to share with you why I believe a sympathetic survival syndrome is so critical. Because when you're in survival, when you're trapped in survival, your ability to heal, your ability to grow, your ability to learn and even flourish is greatly reduced. Your brain and nervous system is compromised and spending most of its energy on just keeping us in survival, keeping us alive. But we can no longer heal. We can no longer grow or learn or flourish. So let's really talk about the practicality of this. When a new patient comes into your office and they're in a sympathetic survival syndrome, it is almost impossible to get that patient to begin to heal, to improve, to increase their life expression unless you get them out of the survival syndrome. Now, there are many ways to do this, including our adjustment, of course, but one of my many mentors, Dr. Fred Barge, taught me a long time ago that the first and most important thing that any doctor should ever do for any patient is give them hope. Hope is one of the things that are necessary to get us out of a survival syndrome. We need to make people feel comfortable. We need to build rapport. We need to earn their trust. We need to educate them properly. We need to be forward-thinking, future-thinking in our language. Show them that there's a way, a path out of this problem. Let them know what to expect, that as they do heal, how they're going to function better physically, emotionally, how it's going to impact their life. When we do, we get people out of sympathetic survival syndrome, and now their ability to get remarkable results, the miracles that chiropractic is famous for, to manifest. As someone who runs a coaching company, I have the same issue. You know, people tend to make a decision based on two possibilities, inspiration or desperation. And unfortunately, even as chiropractors, the majority of us finally decided enough is enough and I need to do something different and better when we're desperate. So probably 70 or 80% of the people who join the Master Circle join in a state of desperation. This is sad, but it's true. So one of the first things that I have to do as a coach so that they can regrow themselves and regrow their practice is I have to get them out of a sympathetic survival syndrome. Some of them are thinking of leaving chiropractic. Some of them are angry at the insurance companies. Some of them can't understand why their methods that used to work are no longer working. They're trapped in survival. So I ask very specific questions to try to get them to think about the future, not about the past. What experts have taught us, quite frankly, is when we're trapped in the past, we generally get depressed or anxious or guilty. When we're focused in the moment, we find peace. But for those of us that really want to grow and to change and to innovate and to create good end results, we've got to be future-based. We've got to be thinking about the future. So this is an important part of the coaching process, just like it's an important part of the chiropractic process with patients. Our ability to learn, our ability to flourish is greatly reduced. So get this. This is a critical linchpin. Whenever our brain goes out of balance from constant stress, the body, unfortunately, will follow. The body goes out of balance. How it manifests is different for each individual. For some people, it manifests in Parkinson's, and others it's low back pain, and in someone else it might be ulcers or diverticulitis. Someone else it might be eczema, but it always will go out of balance. The brain controls things, the body follows the brain. So when the brain goes out of balance, unfortunately, the body will follow and go out of balance as well. But the opposite is also true, ladies and gentlemen. When the brain is once again rebalanced, the body always follows. It's just the way it works. So our job in adjusting people is not so much to try to correct the subluxation. We want to correct the subluxation to help the brain go back into balance, not to correct the mechanical problem at the site of the subluxation. What we really need to do is have a pattern interrupt to the brain function to reboot, to defragment the brain so it goes back into balance, because when it does, the body will follow. Here's yet another really important reason why having a great tool like the NeuroInfiniti is so important, so we can document this. This is why chiropractic is moving in a neurological way, and I will be documenting that for you in just a few moments. Let's go to the next slide. So we have different names for the same thing. When the sympathetics are firing, it's the fight-flight mechanism. In the last decade or two, we've been referring to that as defense physiology. Today, I'm asking you to change that term to sympathetic survival syndrome. They're all basically the same. Why is it so important? Because it causes the body to naturally and innately respond to go back into survival. How it goes back into survival is our heart rate increases when we're under stress. Our blood pressure increases regardless of the type of stress. Our blood sugar increases when we're under stress. Respiration increases when we're under stress. Our skin and sweat glands increase when we're under stress. Our pupils dilate when we're under stress. And there's a tremendous additional secretion of cortisol, adrenaline, epinephrine when we're under stress. Again, all of this is normal and natural, provided our parasympathetics then fire and we go back into a relaxation response, allowing the body to normalize, to go back into a state of homeostasis. When the sympathetics are dominant, the body and the brain cannot go back into homeostasis. And long-term increases in our heart rate, long-term increases in blood pressure, blood sugar, respiration rate, sweat glands, the pupils dilating, and the spilling out of cortisol, adrenaline, and epinephrine cause a wide range of damaging effects throughout our entire nervous system and our entire body, putting us into that neurologic epidemic. Prolonged stress, sympathetic survival syndrome, SSS, without the appropriate relaxation response will cause a weakening of our heart, shrinkage of the brain, and inflammation which prevents the formation of new neurons. This is really critical. Whenever there's sympathetic survival syndrome taking place long term, our hearts will weaken from working harder, from our respiration rate being higher, our heart beating harder. Our heart will eventually weaken. But even more profound, it causes a shrinkage of the brain. There have been so many studies that show that when the brain is under constant stress, the sympathetics are dominant, the brain actually shrinks. And inflammation occurs. Now, inflammation, again, is a natural, innate process. Inflammation is nothing more than innate trying to insulate ourselves from being highly acidic. And we become highly acidic, yes, sometimes from the foods we eat, but mostly from the stress that we're under. And innate tries to insulate the body from this acid by creating inflammation. But inflammation, as we all know, is the precursor of almost every disease we know of on planet Earth. So prolonged stress creates serious problems. It weakens our heart. It's so much harder for us to be loving and kind when our heart's weakened, to have the energy. Our brain shrinks, our cognitive skills start to diminish rapidly, and inflammation occurs anywhere and everywhere in the body. So get this, all sickness, all disease, and all behavioral problems begin with brain imbalance as a result of chronic stress. So we have to ask ourselves this question: is vertebral subluxation a cause or an effect? Now, for almost 120 years, we've talked about it being a cause. And I'm sure there are still certain circumstances where it probably is. And I wouldn't want anybody to think ill of me or anyone else in chiropractic when we say subluxation more often than not is an effect. But subluxation is how the spine adapts by shutting down part of the nervous system when the brain is under chronic stress. No different than the circuit breakers in your home causing some of the circuits to shut down instead of the house blowing up or burning down. This is the same cause, the same basic phenomenon. And quite frankly, Richard, you were the first person who I ever heard talk about this issue that we were taught in chiropractic that structure determines function. But you were the one who said that also function determines structure. And it was when I started to understand this whole issue about brain-based wellness that that made so much sense to me. Because when we're functioning inappropriately, our structure has to adapt to that. Our psychology affects our physiology. And this is an important issue. So all sickness, all disease, all behavioral problems in all people begin with brain imbalance. And that is a byproduct of chronic stress. And what we need to do is we need to change our focus as chiropractors to de-stress people, to teach them to live a lifestyle that is less stressful, to be able to monitor and manage their brain stress and its physiological effects on the body so that we could show them the seriousness, the significance of what's going on with their life, what's going on based on their lifestyle decisions, and why what we offer as chiropractors is absolutely essential. It's life-saving. Let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about chiropractic and brain function. Chiropractic is a neuromusculoskeletal science. It always was, and as long as I'm alive, it always will be. The truth is, there are many in our profession who seem to want to keep erasing the word neuro. They keep referring to chiropractic as a musculoskeletal science. And this is inappropriate and wrong and should never be allowed by anyone. And when we look at it, no one has ever seen anywhere in all our history in chiropractic, no one has ever stated or written that chiropractic was a musculoskeletal neuroscience. It always begins with neuro, it goes to the muscular system, and then it goes to the skeletal system. And this, again, is one of the reasons why I love the NeuroInfiniti. It's the only tool out there that I know checks the nervous system, not the muscular system. There's nothing wrong with checking the muscular system, but the muscular system is an effect based on the nervous system. So we need to remember and maintain our integrity that chiropractic is neuromusculoskeletal. This is why we have statements like, it's mind over matter. Yes, it's our brain over our body. And we have statements in chiropractic like above, down, inside out. Yes, one could make the argument that that's from the heavens down, but I'm clearly making the argument it's from the brain down and from inside out. We need to recognize that this is our history, this is our heritage as chiropractors, and we must protect this at all times. We should be proud of this at all times and not reduce ourselves to becoming some sub-orthopedic specialist. We're a functional neurologist. So the new story of chiropractic takes us away from just relieving nerve pressure to normalizing and maximizing brain function. Ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing wrong with relieving nerve pressure, but that's just a small piece to what we do. The reason we adjust subluxations, the reason most chiropractors are attempting to relieve nerve pressure is because every adjustment normalizes and maximizes brain function when the adjustment is administered properly. And we need to see the bigness of that, the significance of that. We need to communicate that to people in our community. We need to communicate that in the media. We need to communicate that to every patient that walks into our office, that every adjustment normalizes and maximizes brain function. And just see the sequence here. Mrs. Smith, stress causes your brain to go out of balance. When your brain goes out of balance, it will cause your body to go out of balance. I adjust you to help cause your brain to go back into balance. When your brain goes back into balance, your body will follow. So what is the reason that all chiropractic techniques work? Let's dig in even deeper. When we think in terms of almost 120 years of over 100 different approved chiropractic techniques, look at the variety, look at the width and breadth of what's out in our profession. We have upper cervical specific, Logan Basic. We have Gonstead, Corin specific technique, network. We have all different SOT, AK. We have wide range activator. We have so many different techniques out there. Toughness. The list goes on and on. I don't mean to leave any technique out, but there's so many techniques. They're so different. They approach the spine from every different angle. They have different philosophies, different intent, but they have one thing in common. The reason they all work is because every one of them goes about a different way of normalizing and maximizing brain function by creating a pattern interrupt to the brain and the nervous system and by rebooting the brain. It's illogical to think that someone can hold a ligament in the buttocks or toggle the atlas and get similar results, but they do. It's illogical to think that someone could use a handheld instrument or use a soft, gentle adjustment or a forceful dynamic thrust and get similar results, but they do. And they do because all adjustments properly administered normalizes and maximizes brain function. Now, the truth is not all adjustments are properly administered. And in spite of our lack of skill or our lack of awareness or our lack of knowledge, or most important, our lack of adapting to the situation in front of us, because no two patients are exactly the same, we still produce miracles. But we can get better. We need to get better. We need to be more consistent, and we need to consistently get great results. So part of this new language of chiropractic is we need to talk about to our patients that pain hurts. Yeah, I'm concerned about your pain. Yes, I want to do whatever I can to help you alleviate your pain, but stress kills. Much more important than alleviating your pain is neutralizing your stress. And the way we do that is through an effective chiropractic adjustment. Let's go to the next slide. Experts in our profession, like Ted Carrick, you, Richard, Rob Melillo, Joe Dispenza, experts outside of our profession like Dan Amen, like Mark Hyman and Patrick Porter have been leading the charge for brain-based wellness for years. We've got to pay attention to this. We can't turn our cheek. We can't turn a deaf ear. There can't be so many brilliant experts who are willing to go out on the limb and tell a different story and have a different focus unless they had validity to it. And I know for a fact that they do. You know, Richard, Rob Melillo, he's a chiropractor like you and me. He's neurologically based. He is the current president of the Association for Functional Neurology and Rehabilitation. This is an international multidisciplinary group, and a chiropractor is the head of it. You know, Joe Dispenza has written some amazing books like Evolve the Brain, has had a huge impact. And I don't mean to leave anyone out, but we've got to pay attention. Brain-based wellness has been out there for a long time. Experts have, like you, Richard, have put this together, organized it. I don't mean to leave anyone out of this process, but we've got to pay attention. The brain and the nervous system can easily change for better or worse. Neuroplasticity, we've known about this for decades. And the brain and the nervous system can change for the worse when it's under constant stress. It could change for the better when we de-stress the brain, when we normalize the sympathetic-parasympathetic imbalance by properly caring for these patients as a result of properly monitoring these patients. This is why neurologically based chiropractic, it's at the right time. It is showing us what the next step of evolution in our profession is. A brain that refires together will rewire together. We know that it's a neurological principle. So to effectively reset, rewire, and reboot the brain requires a simple formula of frequency over time. So let me address this issue of frequency over time. Anytime we want to learn something new, which is another way of saying rewiring the brain, creating new synaptic connections, it requires frequency over time. If I didn't currently speak the language in France, the French language, and I wanted to learn, if I hired a tutor for 15 minutes a month, the odds of me becoming effective at speaking French in a year, very, very small. But if I hired a tutor who worked with me an hour a day, 3 days a week, the chances of me becoming a proficient in speaking French in a year, very, very high. And we can give one example after another. It's the same thing with resetting, rewiring, and rebooting the brain. It requires frequency over time. And this is important because chiropractors pick out a schedule of care either based on what their clinic director taught them or what their own personal experience was or what they think will be accepted. None of these work well. None of these are truthful. We have to develop a frequency of schedule and a length of schedule based on what's in the patient in front of us best interest. But we need to communicate to that patient that we need to rewire the brain, and it takes weeks or months to rewire that brain, and it takes frequency to rewire that brain. This is important if we want to get the results that patients are capable of getting. We need to recognize that patients aren't broken. They've just lived an inappropriate lifestyle because no one taught them, and they allowed themselves to unfortunately get to a place of desperation, and we need to change all of that by taking control and understanding and having the ability to communicate this effectively from the beginning. Let's go to the next slide, please. We could reestablish brain balance and neutralize stress with a variety of things like deep meditation, rhythmic breathing, proper exercise, walking, laughing, new technology, and of course chiropractic care. So let's talk about each of these for just a few moments. Deep meditation. Meditation's been around for centuries. It's an important skill. I meditate regularly. I hope everyone does. We need to teach our patients to do the same. But the truth is, most people, when they try to meditate, they have 1,000 thoughts running through their head. They can't get comfortable. They get fidgety. They want to meditate for 15 or 20 minutes, and after 3 minutes, they're getting up because their sympathetics are red hot, and they never get into a deep meditative state. If they do, it would have a profound effect on neutralizing that sympathetic-parasympathetic imbalance. Rhythmic breathing. Let's go connect this back to our meditation. There are probably at least 100 different forms of meditation. But the truth is, they only have one major common denominator, and it's the breathing. All forms of meditation tell us to breathe in with our nose and diaphragmatically breathe out with our mouth, but our exhalation should always be twice as long as our inhalation. So if you breathe in to the count of 4, you should be breathing out to the count of 8. Now, why is that? Well, when we breathe in, we're firing the sympathetics. But when we breathe out, we're firing the parasympathetics. So if we could fire the parasympathetics twice as much as we fire the sympathetics, over time with some breathing exercises, we could help normalize and create homeostasis or allostasis in the brain. Proper exercise. Certain forms of exercise help us restore balance. Certain forms of exercise do the exact opposite, and we need to know what to recommend and how to recommend those to patients based on where that patient is after we've evaluated them properly. Walking. There are people in our profession, icons in our profession like George Goodhart, who 50 years ago, after he'd adjust a patient, he'd have them walk on a treadmill for 15 or 20 minutes. Yes, of course, there was some of the cross-crawl balancing that took place, but he knew, Goodhart knew, that when people took a leisurely, relaxed walk, not race walking, not stress walking, but a relaxed walking, that it helped restore balance and de-stress the brain. Quite frankly, I have asked audiences in my outside presentations for years, if you can close your eyes and envision some place where you're always relaxed, doing something that relaxes you, where you feel calm and peaceful and centered, where would that be? Well, I got to tell you, I asked the audience for their answers, and I've gotten the most bizarre range of answers you can imagine. But here's a common denominator. Over 90% of the answers are outdoors. They might be laying on a beach or skiing down a mountain. They might be fishing in a stream or playing golf on a golf course, but it's outdoors. Being in nature helps us restore brain balance. Belly laughter helps us restore brain balance because it changes our respiration. And there's new technology that does this as well. But nothing, ladies and gentlemen, does it as effectively, as consistently, and as quickly as proper chiropractic care. And we need to understand that. We need to rise up and be proud of that so that we can communicate that with certainty and with confidence. We can no longer be confused about who we are or what we do or the effect of what we do has on other people's lives in the most profound and positive ways. Let's go to the next slide. This is one of the most important things I learned from you, Richard. I've learned an awful lot, but this is certainly at the top of my list, that each adjustment needs to be adapted to restore proper brain balance. We talked about up until this point of proper adjustment properly administered. Well, let's talk about one of the cardinal rules about that. Richard has taught the profession that there are 4 brain dysfunctions. The brain is either over-aroused, under-aroused, unstable, where it goes back and forth between over and under aroused, or it's exhausted. Now, exhausted is where the most severe diseases show up. But the most common of these is over aroused. How we adjust the frequency, duration, and intensity of your adjustment is mandated based on which of these 4 conditions are taking place. And Richard is the profession's expert in this. Everything I know about it, I've learned from him. But if someone's sympathetics are over-aroused, you want to adjust them a bit less frequently, a bit less forcefully, and you want to adjust far fewer areas. Maybe 1 or 2 vertebrae, not 10 or 24. On the other hand, if someone's nervous system is under-aroused, you want to adjust them more forcefully, you want to adjust more regions, and you want to adjust them more often. If someone's unstable, depending on where they are today, will dictate your system. So clearly, we need to learn this so we could be much more effective and much more consistent in the quality of care that we deliver. If you want to learn more about this, you should ask Richard, because, again, I've learned everything I know from him on this. Let's go to the next slide. So the new language in the new chiropractic story. Chiropractic adjustments reboot, defrag, synchronize, and harmonize brain function. Let's talk about this for a moment. Every one of us use a computer almost every single day of our lives. Fortunately, 99% of the time it works beautiful. But we've all had multiple experiences where the computer froze or shut itself down or was painfully slow. We've all been trained that when that happens, we hit the Control, Alt, Delete keys, commonly referred to as a reboot. And in the vast majority of the time when that happens and we reboot the computer, it begins to work perfectly normal again. I contend that every adjustment does that for brain function. Every computer on planet Earth has software built into it where it defragments itself periodically, or you have to go in and defragment it. What defragmentation is reorganizing all the data so it can be accessed faster, quicker, more efficiently. Every adjustment defrags the brain. So we need to think in terms of this. In fact, if I were communicating to a patient, I would explain exactly that to the patient. They get it. One of the cardinal rules of communication, ladies and gentlemen, is the most effective way to get a new point across is you link the known to the unknown. Well, most patients don't know what we're talking about today, but they certainly know what reboot and defragmentation is. So use those analogies in making your new story come alive. I would even go so far as to say that by getting under regular chiropractic care and following my recommendations exactly the way I've laid it out, we're going to upgrade your brain from a Pentium 1 to a Pentium 4. People get what that means. So this is all part of the new story. We need to recognize that the purpose of chiropractic care is to normalize and maximize brain function. Start saying that today. Start saying that regularly and consistently until it becomes a habit, till you completely own it and you start communicating it to your patients and your community over and over again. Part of the new story is that all stress creates brain imbalance, and chiropractic care rebalances the brain. That one sentence should be branded into everything you think, say, and do. Your patient should be able to repeat that back to you. The miracles that chiropractic is famous for is the result of the adjustment, the effective, properly administered adjustment, which resets, rebalances, and reestablishes normal brain function. And let's not lose the connection that when the brain is balanced, the body will follow. When the brain is imbalanced, unfortunately, the body will follow that as well. Let's go to the next slide. I love this statement, and I hope that you love it as much as I do. Listen to it carefully. Align the brain and the body. Your brain is the control system of the body. Brain balance and harmony is essential to overall well-being and optimal cognitive, emotional, and physical performance. Once the brain is balanced, the body always follows. This condition of harmony is known as homeostasis and allostasis. Once you achieve homeostasis, you will enjoy new states of self-regulation and relaxation, allowing you to think more clearly, perform more successfully, and experience a higher degree of hope and happiness. Isn't that what we all want? Don't we all want to have better self-regulation, be more relaxed far more often? Don't we all and our patients want to think more clearly, perform more successfully, and experience a higher degree of hope and happiness? This is what happens when we align the brain and the body. In just a few minutes, I'll show you how that connection happens in more detail. Now, let's even take a step back. Let's even look at something like posture. We all know that when someone is carrying their cranium, their skull, in front of their body, this is epidemic. If you were to look at someone's posture from the side, the vast majority of your patients are holding their head in front of their body. This is because they're in fight-flight. They're in a sympathetic survival syndrome. They're in the attack mode. And you could, of course, try to alleviate this with things like a posture pump or traction. Yes, those will help. I'm a huge fan. But if you don't get that parasympathetic balance to go back, it will never stay. Posture, ladies and gentlemen, is nothing more than a neurological program representing brain balance or brain imbalance. We could prove this. You could say to somebody, sit up straight, as someone has probably said to you dozens of times. And you will for the moment. But as soon as you consciously stop overriding it, you will always go back into that distorted posture. Because posture is a neurological program. It's balanced when the brain is balanced. It's imbalanced when the brain is imbalanced. We want to align the brain and the body. When we align the brain and the body, all the best things to allow us to live our best life, to age gracefully instead of growing old, to be healthy and vibrant instead of sick and diseased is what happens. And we as chiropractors hold in our hands the ability to do this, in our heart the ability to do this, and in our head the ability to do this. Quite frankly, one of the critical first steps in this process is each of us has got to create sympathetic, parasympathetic balance. We've got to get back into that relaxation mode. We have to get adjusted more effectively, more often. Tomorrow morning, I'm driving 45 minutes to get adjusted by someone who's an expert. I'm probably going to drive by 50 to 100 chiropractors to get the adjustment that I know will help me the most. We've got to learn to laugh more. and breathe more effectively and be outdoors more and all the things we've talked about, because when we're balanced, we're far more capable of being relaxed ourselves so we could think more clearly, communicate more effectively, perform more successfully, and have hope and happiness not only for ourselves, but to lead by our example. Let's go to the next slide. Dr. Candace Pert, best-selling author of The Molecules of Emotion, she was quoted to say this: "How we experience our world is governed in large part by the structure and function of our brain and nervous system." But my favorite is this. Nobel Prize recipient Dr. Roger Sperry says that the spine is the motor that drives the brain. According to his research, 90% of the stimulation and the nutrition to the brain is generated by the movements of the spine. That is profound. That is the missing piece to this entire conversation. That the spine is the motor that drives the brain. But also, let's remember that the brain is what causes the distortions or imbalances to the spine. That 90% of the stimulation and the nutrition to our brain is generated by the movement of the spine. So an unsubluxated spine is freely movable. It allows the person to have greater ranges of motion. This is essential for the stimulation and nutrition to the brain. A subluxated spine is fixated, it's locked, it's frozen in place, reducing the stimulation and the nutrition to the brain. We have to understand this, and we have to communicate this to our patients and to our community. Sperry goes on to state that only 10% of our brain's energy actually goes into thinking, metabolism, immunity, or healing, because 90% goes into processing and maintaining the body's relationship with gravity. That's called posture. That's why posture is so important. But posture is a neurological program, a representation to brain balance or imbalance. This is profound. Please jot this down. Please start talking about this. And if you're not sure of this, Google Roger Sperry, Google Candace Pert, Google this information. You'll see that this is really important and profound information that we chiropractors should be expert in understanding, expert in communicating, and expert in helping people with. Let's go to the next slide. Unless we awaken to the bigness of chiropractic, why the adjustment is so amazing, and why we have been chosen to serve, practice success and practice fulfillment will continue to elude us. So chiropractic is bigger than moving a bone out of place back into place. It's bigger than relieving nerve pressure. It's bigger than improving posture. It's about brain function. We have to get that. And we have to recognize that we all have been chosen to serve. If every one of you just start to think about how you got into chiropractic, there was such a crazy series and cascade of events that had to take place. You couldn't have chosen it if you tried. It chose you. We need to own up to that. We need to accept the responsibility of that. And we need to recognize that if you were chosen to be a chiropractor, you could rest assured that you weren't chosen to play small. You weren't chosen to struggle. That you being successful is just as much your natural birthright as your patient is to be healthy. We got to get that. Nature needs no help. It just needs no interference. Success and prosperity need no help. It just needs no interference. We need to understand that. The problem is so many of us have complicated practice and gotten so interfered in this process that you need someone to guide you out of that maze and into the sunlight. It's easy to achieve world-class clinical results, to develop a stellar reputation and a high-powered and effective team around you, and soaring profitability. I got to tell you, in my experience of coaching hundreds of chiropractors, right at this moment, the truth is the middle class of chiropractic is disappearing. Those that are struggling worse than ever. The things that used to work some of the time, we're finding isn't working most of the time anymore, because the world's changed and you haven't adapted and adjusted to the changing times. but those that are always doing great are doing better than ever. Honest to God, I spoke to a chiropractor today who collected $240,000 last month. But I also spoke to a chiropractor today who collected $6,000 last month. Both are possible. Both are achievable by any of us. It all depends on what you believe and what your identity is and where your confidence is and your clarity and how you're willing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and how hard you want to work and how much you want to serve, and if it's about you and your ego or about giving out of your abundance. We need to recognize that your ego is not your amigo. We need to get to the place that service is what drives us, making a difference. When we put our head on the pillow at night, we want to know that today was well spent, that we made a difference, that we contributed, that we helped other people in a profound and positive way. When we do, we grow and we become more peaceful. Let's go to the next slide. Please, I'm asking every one of you to email me. Tell me what you thought of this. Tell me what you agree with, what you don't agree with. What was the most profound thing that I shared with you? What was part of the new language that made the most sense to you? What changes you're willing to do in your office? How are you going to change your adjusting protocols or your languaging or your recommendation and your schedules? Email me. I promise you I will respond back. This is an important exchange. Having one webinar is important, but it's an exchange that really brings it to life, answers your questions, and gives you clarity. If you want to speak to me and you want to have a conversation, I'm more than happy to do that. You can email me at bob@themastercircle.com or call me at 800-451-4514. I'll be happy to put you into my schedule and speak to you. No charge, no obligation, colleague to colleague, just trying to help a friend. If you want to learn more and engage in this new conversation and discover how to grow your practice and your income like never before, get in touch with me. I also have an online 8-hour postgraduate boot camp on brain-based wellness. Yes, of course, I cover what was in this class, but I've got 8 hours of material, far more information, ways to implement this in your practice. It's a profound program. It's all done online. There's an e-book. There's marketing materials. There's all kinds of information that you get with it. Please contact me. I'd be more than happy to get you that information. It's very inexpensive, and it's really profound. It will change your practice and your life. I'm also willing to offer each and every one of you a complimentary practice evaluation. If you're interested and you're willing to open up and tell me a little bit more about yourself and answer some of my questions, I'll tell you where you're doing well and where you need to focus and what you might be missing. Listen, 20% of what we do creates 80% of our results, but most people don't know what the 20% things to do are. I'll be happy to share that. And my biggest event of the year, my super conference, is coming up September 26th to 28th in Orlando. Would love to have you attend. There are 11 world-class speakers, including Richard Barwell and myself. Rob Malillo that we spoke about is going to be there. Patrick Porter, who we mentioned with Brain-Based Wellness, will be there. It will be a phenomenal event. It will help inspire you, grow you, teach you the habits of success. I'm telling you, it will transform your life forever. Please let me know. We'd love to have you come. If you'd like information, go to www.superconference2013.com. It'll explain everything and help you even register if you'd like. I've given you my heart and soul for 58 minutes. Richard, I'm sure you have some comments. You always do. It's one of the things I love and appreciate about you. But I really hope that this webinar inspired the listeners to really change and adapt and transform themselves to the next level and to recognize that their birthright is to be super successful helping other people.
Oh, tremendous, Bob. Thank you very much. Listen, I just had today 3 people contact me saying, and this is a sad story, saying these are chiropractors that have come through the programs or listened to us or listened to some of our websites, our web programs, and say, I love this. This is where my heart is. I don't know how to talk to my patients about the nervous system. This is a chiropractor talking about it. And that's sort of the sad state of the affairs. And every one of them, I'm going to get back in touch with them today and say, you need to get on and listen to this program because there's the answer, how you talk to it. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I know the material you've got, and I know how in-depth it is in this. And it's just so exciting to hear this. And I'm going to make sure that everybody in our list gets hold of this right away. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We have a job to do. We are working at this together, and there's only one thing that can happen, and that is that the profession is going to improve because of it. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, Richard, and I thank you for all you do, and you're right, we're working together. It's time that we elevate this profession and elevate people's pride and their confidence, and when they do, their life will take on a new direction and a better direction. So thank you.
All right, and quickly before we close here, if there are any questions from anybody listening in for Dr. Bob or Dr. Barwell, raise your hand through the control panel. I'll quickly unmute you so you can ask. We have just a couple of seconds here left. All right, guys, I'm getting lots of comments, but no questions. Comments raining of great information. Can't wait to learn more. Awesome job, guys.
I have one comment I want to make, and if you don't accept his offer of a free consultation with Dr. Bob Hoffman, you're crazy. So on that note, I'm hoping we don't have any crazy people out there.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Dee.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.